Hey, everybody, welcome to your Money Map, sponsored by the Alliance for Lifetime Income. I'm your host, Jean Chatzky. Very glad to have all of you along today for what I think is going to be a really interesting conversation. So, as we were talking about during our last broadcast, our nation has entered what we're calling the peak 65 zone. This is a huge moment in time when more Americans will turn the traditional retirement age of 65 than at any point in our country's history. So, what's it really like crossing into the peak 65 zone? When you talk to consumers who have either done it or who are looking ahead at it coming their way, they will share a range of emotions, everything from excitement to fears to a little bit of both, particularly when it comes to the topic of making sure that their money lasts as long as they do. And there are, of course, many other feelings that characterize retirement and the years leading up to it. Today, we're going to be joined by a panel of those consumers who are each at different points in their retirement journey. We're going to hear about how they feel about where they are today and what the future holds. But to help me facilitate this conversation, I would first like to welcome back Jason Fichtner. Jason is the executive director of the Alliance's Retirement Income Institute. He's also chief economist for the Bipartisan Policy Center. He has studied the peak 65 zone and what it means for you. And one of the biggest takeaways is that we all need to rethink retirement. Jason, welcome. So glad to have you back.
Thanks, Jean. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you here. Can I start right there? Rethinking retirement, those two words, that's a main focus, if perhaps I think the biggest point that you're making in this recent report. Why do you think that the changes to the traditional retirement framework are so necessary?
Well, this is a good place to start, Jean, so thank you. And I think it's important we talk about what do we mean by the traditional retirement framework before we start rethinking what that means. So let's remind people that a good metaphor for thinking about the traditional retirement framework is the old three-legged stool. The three-legged stool retirement, which consisted of employer pensions, personal savings, and Social Security. That's that three legs that together created stability of income in retirement. But that metaphor is now outdated. Many people no longer have a traditional pension plan anymore, so they're no longer getting that paycheck every month when they retire. People are relying on 401k style retirement plans that are available through their employers, but access is not universal. So roughly 50% of people still don't have access to a retirement plan, now a defined contribution plan. And with higher costs for housing, healthcare, and other expenses, it's difficult for many to save. And Social Security, again, one of those three legs, is also facing financial trouble. So even if you take aside Social Security's financial troubles, again, it was designed to replace roughly 40% of your income in retirement for the average American. That's part of that three-legged stool. So we think about this as like a one-third, one-third, one-third. How does that actually work for income? And now we need to rethink what that means in retirement, because we have to recognize the changing nature of retirement. No longer a pension. How do we take defined contribution plans and turn that asset base into a stream of income? And what does it mean now to retire? A lot of people continue to work. They live longer, so longevity is longer than people were having before in the traditional days. And people want to continue to do things with their lives. So we're rethinking retirement, both from a financial standpoint of how to generate protected income in retirement, but also what it means for life fulfillment as well as also changed.
Yeah, and it's one thing to hear about it and another to actually do it. If you are watching and you're interested in more information about the paper that Jason wrote on the peak 65 zone, I would encourage you to do two things. First, go to protectedincome.org. That's the website of the Alliance for Lifetime Income. You can find the research there. But while you're there, take a moment and subscribe to our free bi-weekly newsletter. We push out all of the important pieces of information about retirement, news about retirement, that anybody approaching retirement should need to know. So go ahead, take a second, go to protectedincome.org and make sure you sign up. And with that, I would like to welcome our three consumer panel to the discussion and to the conversation. As they join us on stage, I will tell you just a little bit about each of them, but then I'm going to give them a chance to tell you all a bit about themselves. In our top right-hand corner, we've got Mark Emerson. Mark is a newly retired 65-year-old. Mary Peacock is clockwise in our circle. She's a 62-year-old teacher at her local community college, not yet retired, but looking forward to it. And Milagros Millie Smith, we'll call you Millie, is a 58-year-old physician assistant and business owner. She rounds out our panel today. Thank you all for joining me and joining Jason. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, let me start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your work life, and how you got to this point in your retirement journey.
Well, early on in my career, I had my own business. And as time went on, it was increasingly hard to find qualified people for it. I am a retired diesel truck mechanic, and I did have my own service center for quite a while, for 15 years actually. And at that time, I was offered a position with FedEx as a mechanic, and I went to work for them. And I recently retired from there. I was able to, I was fortunate to have two pensions from them, a traditional pension and a portable pension, as well as a 401k. And I navigated through that, and I guess mid-November I actually retired. And
Congratulations.
yeah, it was
Congratulations. No, that's terrific. That's really, really exciting. Mary, give us your snapshot.
So I currently teach full-time at a community college, actually full-time plus. As you said, I'm 62, and I am hoping that within the next couple of years, I can go into retirement part one. So for many years, I was at home with my children working part-time. And so my work history is not as long as you might assume from my age. And I'm looking forward and really trying to make plans to make sure that, as you said, concerns with having enough money to last as long as I do, but also thinking about some of the major changes. So I mentioned retirement part one. That for me would entail moving across the country, starting what I hope will be a market garden business, and doing that for as long as I can. And then part two would be more of, a slowing down. So I'm hoping that with the resources that I have, and hopefully income from this next venture, I'll be able to have enough that that final portion of my life will not be a burden to my children. It's a real concern to me right now because I have a mother who just this past year went into assisted living, so I know how much that costs. And so those are some of the things that are on my mind.
And really quickly, Mary, your retirement nest egg, is it all in savings? Do you have a pension?
So I do have a pension. I will be receiving a pension from the teacher's retirement system that's in Texas. And then I have an IRA, and I also have a 403B.
Okay, fantastic. Millie, tell us about you.
Hi. So my name is Millie Smith, and I'm 58 years old, and I'm a physician assistant, and I have been for the last 28 years. My husband, as well, is a physician assistant. So we run and operate an urgent care business, and we have for the last 18 years. And thankfully, that's been a very successful small community clinic. So, in terms of us preparing for retirement, we still have 3 children in college, and they're not going to be done for a while. One is planning on going to medical school, so that's long ways away, and she's only in 11th grade. So we are looking forward to retirement, but really, when we've sat down to talk about it, we're trying to figure out how we're nervous about Social Security, and will it still be around when we're there? We're nervous about the investments in the 401k. During the last stock market crash, we lost a lot of money. So we don't really know the direction that the economy is going in. So I think that the avenue that we've chosen to take is to try to, quote, self-fund our retirement. And so we're building business investments that have a revenue stream that is ongoing, so that we can maintain our lifestyle that we have, which we have a very active lifestyle with children and traveling. And we like to do a lot of things that entail, disposable income. So we are very much thinking about all that. And the climate that we're in right now preoccupies us quite a bit.
We as I listen to your stories, I hear a number of threads, Jason, that I'm hoping you can react to and perhaps tell us if they're typical of this peak 65 generation. If number one was a fear of longevity, and I heard it both from Mary but also from Millie. I think we're at this point in our lives where many of us had kids a little bit later. Those kids perhaps are not going to be fully launched until we are well into our 60s. That delays the whole retirement curve and puts a little more pressure on us financially in a sort of a different way of thinking about longevity.
So there are a lot of consistent threads here, Gene. And again, one of the things I'm hearing, and I think why this is so important, and we're talking about the peak 65 zone right now, and just to give everyone sort of a context who's listening to this, right now, this year in 2024, we're going to have 4.1 million people a year turning 65. That's 11,200 a day. That continues through 2027. So when Gene and I hear your stories, these are stories that are happening to millions of Americans every year, 11,200 on average a day. So these are not unique to you. So you should realize that you're not alone. So it's good we're having these conversations because your experiences can help others who are listening to this as well. One of the things that comes up, and I think this is important, is the idea of a pension. So most people who are retiring don't have a pension anymore. About 10% of people have a pension. The rest are reliant on savings or an employer-provided defined contribution plan, so a 401k. And something real quick before I forget, because I want Mary to take a note of this, and if we have time, Gene, we should come back to it. Because you were in Texas as part of the Teachers Retirement Service, that system does not pay into Social Security. So you have what's called uncovered employment, which means you could be subject to something called the windfall elimination provision, or the WEP. So a lot of people don't understand that, and that could reduce your Social Security benefits. So you seem like you're aware of it, but I just wanted to make sure that we had a footnote to come back and talk about it in case that's an issue.
Yes.
Okay, very good. But what you hear is people are concerned about running out of money. Do they have enough money to live? And if you talk to financial planners, this kind of rule of thumb comes out that they suggest you have roughly 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income annually each year. So imagine you had, just to keep the numbers simple, imagine you were making $100,000 a year the year before you retired. That means your savings with Social Security and a pension, if you have one, an individual outside income should be able to generate between $70,000 and $80,000 a year. And a lot of people don't realize that's how much they need to have that lifestyle they're accustomed to. They want to keep being active, they keep wanting to travel, they want to go out. That's what you need, and you kind of have to plan for that and have a budget for it. And people are concerned that they're going to outlive it. And so I think it was, you, Millie, mentioned the idea of having the concern about the market going up and down. So we've talked about protected income. And what do we mean by protected income? That basically is Social Security. It's stable. You know what you're getting every month. when you think about money you're getting from a stock or a bond, that is subject to market volatility, right? The market goes down, you lose some of that income. Interest rates change, you lose some of your income. So what we're trying to help people do is take some of their 401k plan and take some of that nest egg, not necessarily all of it, but some of it, and turn that into an income stream, like an annuity that is protected, so that you know how much money you have to spend every month. And you think about the idea that you had a paycheck when you were working, you want to be able to simulate getting a paycheck when you retire. So one of the things I'm hearing is you're trying to figure out ways to make sure that you have some income in retirement, sort of like a paycheck. So you know how much you can spend every month. You don't spend too little, you don't spend too much, you spend just the right amount so that it can last. And that's one of the themes I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, let me ask you, since you have just done this recently,
Okay.
when you looked at your spending before retirement and your income before retirement, did you were you conscious of how much you would be bringing in during retirement and whether you would be able to make that amount last for the rest of your life? I ask because one of the things that we know is that a lot of people don't run the numbers on how much money they'll need in retirement or actually have in retirement.
Well, actually, I was very fortunate to find actually a friend, but also a financial planner that I could speak to and trust. Some of it was very complicated, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't understand a lot of it. They made me understand it, and they took a snapshot of what I had, made recommendations as to what I could and shouldn't do. And as far as protecting it, I did take my entire lump sum pension and I put it into an annuity. And I chose to do that outside of the employer who did offer it, only because if something happened to myself or it would go to my wife, but if we both passed, it would be gone. And I didn't see a lot of sense in that. This way here, it actually goes to our children beyond that until the money's gone. And I like that part. Plus, it's a protected income stream along with Social Security. You know what you're getting. I did have a 401k separate from that, and I did desert. I invested it differently. I split it. So it's actually invested differently. Some I left where it was in that plan, but there is risks there, and I understand that. But overall it's done well over 25 years. So I'm confident with that. And the other one is a guaranteed interest rate on it for a while. It's like a CD kind of. It's an IRA.
How does having that pension income, the annuity, make you feel? Why did you decide to go down that road?
Well, just for peace of mind and for I had to protect it. I mean, because honestly, that's what I had. I feel very fortunate to have it, but also I wanted to make sure that if anything happened to myself, that my wife would be protected also, because she had a business, but she's was more of a stay-at-home mom and with our children, and I mean, she wouldn't have a large income to
Mary,
live on.
when you look ahead to your retirement, have you run these calculations? Have you thought about how much it will cost you to live and how you'll be able to maintain your standard of living, as Jason was talking about?
I did do it a number of years ago. Since that time, there have been changes both in my income and savings and resources, and that's been on the positive side. But at the time that I ran it, I was just thinking about staying where I am, staying in the same house and in the same community. And I'm no longer thinking about that, which introduces a lot of unknowns. And so I guess the answer is both yes and no. I need to do it again.
When Jason, when you hear people expressing their thoughts of retirement in unknowns, what do you encourage them to do to sort of wrap their hands around it?
This is a big challenge. And this is what we call the retirement income challenge. And the first thing, one, is obviously try to do a budget, which it sounds like you all have done to an extent, to figure out what you have and what you want to be able to purchase and what you can afford. And then I'm also hearing again that theme about protection. And I think one of this is, and this is where it's important, and I know, Mark, you mentioned the word risk a few times. It's important to have an understanding of what risks are out there, right? You have longevity risk, you have inflation risk, you have market risk. The last thing you want to do is be not sleeping at night because you're wondering if the market is going to go up or down. And you want to make sure your spouse, if you have one, is cared for, or your children. So the Mark's done it, but I think it's a pretty good job walking through all these things he wants to do to make sure he's protected. He's not trying to find a way to maximize the potential of getting 20% earnings per year, because he knows that with that risk comes a downside risk where you could lose it as well. So he's trying to make sure that he has the income he needs and the protection for his family. And that's important. And then the idea that, Millie's going through, and also Mary, is trying to make sure you have a budget in place. And I think that's one of the things you start thinking about before you retire, looking through and seeing, what am I spending now per month? What are my income needs? And am I matching it? And then what will that translate into retirement? Because when you think about moving from employment to retirement, things change. Like your tax status will change. You'll no longer be paying payroll taxes if you're not working. If you're working, you will be paying payroll taxes. But thinking about what your basket is. Economists like to talk about consumption baskets. Where are you spending money? Housing, healthcare, travel, food, etc. Think about those baskets you need and make sure you have enough income to basically afford those. That's how you plan and how you budget. And enough people, unfortunately, don't plan ahead of time. You don't want to plan the day you retire. You want to plan several years beforehand.
Millie, I'm interested in. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. You can ask. I'll still say my comment, but what did you want to ask me?
I wanted to ask you about your comment that you're trying to basically really fund your retirement yourself. We have a piece of research that Ipsos conducted, sponsored by the Alliance. It found that only 24% of people are very optimistic about their retirement years. So I'm wondering, what are your goals, and are you feeling optimistic?
So that's a great question, because I was going to elaborate on some of what Jason is saying. So, I consider myself very fortunate because my husband happens to be extremely conservative, and he's financially oriented. He's a medical person, but he just has a knack for finances. And one of the things that we have always been on the path is to reduce our debt. So if we reduce our debt, then our disposable income is much more increased. And so as we go on through our years, our plan is to have minimal debt and just keep the debt that is inevitable. But we've already built our retirement home. It's a lakefront property. And one of the things that he did, which I admire him for, because I personally would have never thought of this, is we made the house net zero. So it's all geothermal, solar panels. And he's always felt like, paying into your utility bills is an expense that never goes away. So when we retire, we're not going to have that utility bill, which is a great savings, because where I live up in the North Country. It's very cold up here. Our winters are terrible. And so this is a huge, venue for savings for us. So reducing our debt, and being able to have, increase our disposable income is a big part of our, quote, self-funding. The other thing that we're doing is we're building various diversified sources of income revenue. So we are diversifying by doing business investments. We're very fortunate that we have a son that graduated from University of Maryland with a degree in finance, who also has a knack for monies. And so he started a commercial property portfolio for us. And so we're optimistic in that sense, but I have a lot of friends who aren't in that position. It also takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of optimism. It takes a lot of insight in order to really make all these goals come to fruition. So it is quite a bit of a challenge.
And I think,
Yeah,
Millie, you mentioned something that's really important, which we didn't cover, but you brought up is debt, because debt can be a major expense. And we were sharing ages, so I'm 52. Both sets of my grandparents have been deceased for several years, but they were Depression era babies. They didn't borrow for anything, to my knowledge, but for a house.
Yeah.
And they made sure their mortgage was paid off before they retired. And so, to your point about disposable income, one of the things I think people should consider when budgeting is, where possible, do pay down debt and try to pay off your house before you retire, because that way, one of the biggest expenses we all have is housing. And if
Right.
that's taken care of and you just think you're paying for taxes and upkeep, that's a big burden off someone's shoulders that allows the rest of your money to take you further in retirement. So that's a very good point.
Thank you.
Another thread I heard through these conversations was this idea of continuing to earn in retirement. Mary talked about opening a market stand. Millie talked about having commercial properties. We all know that being a landlord, not an easy lift all of the time. Mark, I'm not sure if you are working at all or have any part-time gigs,
Well,
but
I'm a landlord.
there you go. It's a common thread. So Jason, this idea, as you look at the peak 65 generation, of earning in retirement or working in retirement, can you talk about that? What kind of a role is this expected to play?
So this is a good segue into thinking about how we rethink retirement in general, because again, for many of us, our first exposure to the concept of retirement was probably the movie On Golden Pond, where you kind of go sit in a rocking chair and watch the sunset, and that's retirement. That's not what it is these days for many people. They want to be active. They want to keep active in their community. They want to volunteer. They want to keep working. So we need to make sure we can facilitate an active lifestyle, whatever that means for the individual person. But when thinking about working retirement, I think it's important for two reasons as we talk about the peak 65 generation. One is just working gives you a sense of satisfaction and engagement with your life. So you don't just withdraw from society, you stay active in some way to the extent you want to. I mean, that's very important for emotional health. And then there's that financial side. So again, as a finance type economist, I'm always thinking about diversification of portfolio. How do you diversify your portfolio? How do you diversify risk? If you're getting additional income in retirement, that's diversifying your portfolio, right? So whether you're getting income from rental property, whether you're working on the side, that can be the little bit extra that's diversified. So if you do have income from stocks, bonds, and that goes down, you might be able to make up a little bit with the income from a rental property. Or if you're working, that could bring us additional income. The point is to have it diversified so that it meets all your needs, plus a little bit more in case one of those goes down, it can fill in the other. So I think this is a great idea to start talking about how you look at work, not just for personal satisfaction, but also for that additional comfort of financial security as part of a diversified retirement portfolio.
Personally, I like the idea just because I'm not sure what I would do all day if I wasn't working. I haven't quite taken up pickleball yet. Maybe I could incorporate that for an hour or so a week, but I know it's not going to keep me busy from 9 to 5. Let me ask all of you, as you look at what could potentially be a 3-decade or longer retirement, what are you afraid of? Millie, let me start with you this time.
My number one fear in life is that I am not going to be around to make sure that my children are where they need to be. So currently I have a 16-year-old, a 19-year-old, a 21-year-old. My 30-year-old is all set. I'm not worried about him anymore. He's the one kind of taking over the businesses. He's got a very, finance oriented mind. I'm done with him. We have grandchildren. He has a great family, great goals. I'm not worried about him. But the 3 younger ones, the 21-year-old is still in college, and they're all Division I athletes, and they still want to further their education. So my main concern is for me to stay healthy and be able to provide for them until once they get to where they want to be, then I'm all set. That's my number one fear.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. Mary, how about you?
I think that the biggest thing on my mind right now, just because, as I mentioned, having gone through the situation with my mother, is needing that extra care. As long as I'm physically okay, able to care for myself, I think one way or another I can make it. But if I end up needing that extra care and knowing how expensive it is now, and knowing that I don't think my resources would last that long if I needed to pay for everything myself out of pocket. I think that's my biggest concern and fear right now.
Yeah, look, the long-term care conundrum is a big problem. I think that a lot of people are really struggling with, because we know, Medicare doesn't step in and pay for much long-term care at all. Mark, for you, are there now that you're in it, are there things that you're worried about, or has your mind been eased?
Um, well, you always end up finding something to be concerned about, but the I too worry about being later in life. Am I going to be able to care for myself? I did get long-term care insurance, which I've had for years, which in itself, is kind of a good peace of mind of sorts. My kids are grown, and like Millie shared, they were both athletes in college and everything. And getting them through college was a challenge, but we did, and they're doing well, and they're off the payroll, as I call it. And have families of their own now. So that part of it is gone. So it's my wife and I, and then the only thing I was never rich. I always worked. I don't really miss working per se. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do all the time, but I have a lot of hobbies, and I'm enjoying that now. And my only concern is that it's nice to have the time to do it now.
Yeah.
And which really isn't a worry, but the only thing to worry about now is the standard of living. And I covered that with a financial planner. I said, look, I've never been rich. This is what I have. What do I look like? And they said, basically, your income won't change when you retire.
So this is an
That's a
important
nice message to hear, right, Jason?
Yeah.
This is what I'm hearing from all three, which is also, I think, very important to think about. Is one, because Gene, you brought up the idea of longevity and retirement may be longer than you think. Mm-hmm. So again, one, if you start working, in your early 20s, you could be working for 40 years, but that 40 years has to basically fund now could be 30 years of retirement. And again, these are numbers from the Social Security Administration. 1 out of every 3 65-year-olds today will live to age 90. 1 out of 3. 1 out of 5 will live to 95. We are having more people turning 100 every year, right? People live longer, so we're having more people turn 100. And when you start thinking about the finances, this is a behavioral finance term, but we call it mental accounting. And people like to think again about buckets. So they think about a bucket they have that goes for necessities. So I need money to cover my rent, my housing, my food, my bills. And I need another bucket that covers the fun stuff. I want to go travel, I want to go out to dinner, etc. So you have money going into 2 buckets. And although we know you might have 1 bank account, so money's fungible, but you mentally think about this as 2 buckets. And you make sure you fund your necessary bucket first so you can pay all your expenses. Everything else goes in the fun bucket. And when you're thinking about healthcare, that has to go in the necessity bucket. So how do you fund those needs you might have? And when thinking about the long-term care needs, again, you're thinking about what you might need 10, 15, 20 years from now. How do you turn that on? 2 things that come to mind is, one, the importance of delaying claiming Social Security. You can claim it as early as 62 and as late as 70. But anything before age 70 really looks like a financial penalty, because 62 is the minimum benefit age and age 70 is the maximum benefit age. And generally speaking, the difference between the age 62 monthly benefit and age 70 is a 77% higher monthly benefit amount, which can go a lot longer when you need it. And the other things, I know, like Mark was talking about annuities, You could always get a deferred annuity that doesn't turn on until you hit 80, when you might need that long-term care, additional healthcare expenses. So thinking about how to bucket these things with protection is also very important. And again, talking to a financial planner can be very helpful in that regard.
Yeah, we got a question online from Bruce, who said that he has similar concerns about long-term care. And Jason, what you're talking about is basically what we sometimes call longevity insurance, a deferred annuity, that where you take a chunk of money, you invest it today, let it grow, and then turn on a paycheck down the road when your healthcare expenses go up and you're more likely to need that money for things like long-term care. I want to just give all of you a chance to ask the question that is on your mind most before we wrap this up here. So, Mary, let me start with you this time. Are there any things that you're wondering about? Any things that are just weighing on you that you'd like to weave into this conversation?
I guess the top question that I have is, I know I need to talk to someone about planning more specifically, but how do I go about finding someone that I feel really listens to me and hears my concerns and is willing to go through not just, plug in numbers, but actually really look at and help me project into the future that I want to have, including that move and so forth?
First of all, I love this question. What you're describing is a comprehensive financial advisor, sometimes called a holistic financial advisor, somebody who's not just going to look at your portfolio, but is going to look at your life, your goals, your dreams, yes, your taxes and your estate plan, but they're going to look at all of it and actually have a conversation about the things that you want before you get to the numbers. Those people are out there. I would start by talking to your friends and your colleagues about the people that they work with and see if you can get a personalized recommendation. There are also some great associations that can point you toward really good people. You can go to the Financial Planning Association or the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors, NAPFA. You can go to protectedincome.org, and there's some guidelines for questions that you should be asking any financial advisor. And then I would have a number of these conversations because that comfort that you described is so important, and you're not going to know it until you feel it. You need somebody that you can talk to like you talk to your doctor. And if you talk to somebody who has all the credentials in the world and you're still not comfortable, doesn't mean they're a bad advisor, but it does mean they're a bad advisor for you. So you just move on and you go to the next person. Jason, you want to add anything to that?
Actually, you took my one line from me, Gene, that I was going to use. Is sort of like finding a financial advisor is like buying a car. You don't buy the first one you test drive. You test drive multiple cars and find the one that fits you best. You don't marry the first person you date. Hopefully, maybe you did, but you want to kind of go out there and test the market a bit, who's good for you. But you really should, to Gene's point, there are great advisors out there, but not every advisor is right for the right person. So find the one that's right for you. And again, go out, shop around, ask questions. A good advisor will give a free consultation and will want to sit down with you, at least have that opening conversation about how they can help you, listen to you, hear what you're trying to say, and then give you back some advice. But at least talk to three. Same thing with getting, home repairs, right? Talk to three mechanics. That's kind of the usual rule of thumb. I think that applies here as well for financial advisors.
Right, thank you.
Absolutely. Mark, do you have a question?
I was just going to say that when you do find the right person, you know it immediately. I did, and I knew it on the phone when I called her the very first time, and that was wonderful. And it, like I said before, just made everything come to bring everything together, and to know that I'm doing the best with what I have, and reaching my goals and my thoughts. And that was the first conversation she had with me was, what do you want? it wasn't about the money. What do you want to do? What do you want, what do you want to be able to do? And that was nice because then we build everything around that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's
I
so
think that's the
true.
biggest important thing with all of it.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
one thing I'm hearing too is you shouldn't be afraid to ask for help, right? This is one of those, if it was super simple, we wouldn't be having these conversations today about the importance and the challenges out there. So people should feel comfortable finding somebody and talking about the challenges they have so they can get the advice that they need.
My
Yeah,
only other
absolutely.
advice that I would have, it would be this, and that is make sure you understand, and as you navigate, especially with the government and with insurance companies and everything else, make sure you understand it. Make them make you understand it, and don't be afraid to see it in writing.
I think that's such an important point. And, Mark, we had the opportunity to talk to you before we got on the air today, and you were very clear about the fact that you didn't understand all of it at first, and you needed to find somebody who was able to put all the pieces together, help you put all the pieces together. And this is why I'm such a believer that having a pre-retirement financial planning checkup, kind of like a financial physical, is so important. If you're 10 years out from retirement, that is a fantastic time to do it. If you're closer and you haven't done it, it's not too late. Millie, any questions on your mind before we wrap this up today?
Yeah, I think I have a question for Jason. So, I'm 58, but I'm not quite really focusing a ton on retirement just because we have all these other plans that I've shared with you already. I'm wondering if there is a timeline for certain things. Is there a path that you should be following? So should by 60, you should definitely have this in place. By 62, you should definitely have that in place. Is there any words of wisdom and advice that you can offer as my husband and I start to approach that, getting closer to 65 and just preparing for that?
That's a great question. And my first answer would be that hopefully people who are listening, if they're not yet in their 50s, they should start saving as early as possible, especially in their 20s, or if you have kids, help them with a 529 plan or some sort of savings account. I remember when I was growing up, my parents got me the passbook savings account. We still had the dot matrix printers. We go into the bank and it would show. So that kind of got the savings juices going when I was, less than 10 years old. But, directly to your point, Millie, one of the things in your 50s to make sure of is, as Jean said, have a financial checkup. Go in and talk to a financial advisor or planner, see where you are and have them start running some numbers. The second also is start thinking about, if you don't have it already, wills and estates. Talk to a lawyer, right? Make sure you've got everything in place. And that with the two, a lawyer and a financial planner, they'll start talking and walking you through the legal documents you need for power of attorney for healthcare, power of attorney for finances. You should have a trusted, at this age, when we're in our 50s, if it's not your spouse, a trusted source who can take care of things if you get mentally incapacitated, health incapacitated, someone to run your finances. So those legal documents are important to have up front. And that's kind of the planning process, because that'll help you think about, what insurance do I need? Again, home insurance, life insurance, long-term care insurance. What am I doing in my finances? Am I invested in the right portfolio to protect myself from downside risk? As I get closer to the age at which I want to retire, your portfolio needs to adjust as well. So a good financial advisor and a lawyer who does estate planning, those two things as you get into your late 50s, if you haven't done so already, are things you should start doing, and that'll help you plan for the next steps.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
And I want to just say a big thank you to all of you for an excellent conversation. We've gotten some comments that this has been an excellent conversation. I wholeheartedly agree. Thank you for being open and honest about your financial lives. We don't have these conversations enough. Just a reminder to everybody who's watching, if you're not a subscriber to the bi-weekly newsletter that comes out of the Alliance for Lifetime Income, it's something that you don't want to miss. We touch on the important news and information that anybody who is planning on retiring at any point in the near future really needs. So protectedincome.org. Go there. You'll find more information on this conversation, and you can subscribe to the newsletter as well. Thank you, Millie. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mark.
Thank
You're
you
welcome.
for allowing
Thank
us
you.
to participate.
And
Thanks to all of you as
Jason,
well.
Thanks, Jason.
Jason, thanks for
Thanks,
coming
Jason.
back. All right.
My pleasure.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody. We'll see you next
Bye-bye.
time.